sat at my house, it's difficult, it breaks up and all kinds of stuff.
We're gonna have to talk loud. I just have that small laptop. I don't have the big camera set up. This is my home Mac that I'm using.
No, the microphone.
Yeah.
So that's good.
I can easily click it to the projector so we can see when Nikki shares. We can see it easily. Okay.
Hey, Mr. Colvin, can you hear us?
You see it? What kind of?
So you should be able to click on your screen to turn your microphone on and off.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Perfect.
Oh, okay.
You're a little zoomed in there, Chief.
Yep, got it.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. And let's see. We'll look for a motion to approve the agenda.
We do have some corrections to the agenda. Do you want to hear those before?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we will be striking the first action item 6A. That item will be right. We're striking that one. And the revised agenda actually got revised twice. Some of you should have that through item K, your copies.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the copy that's online still has an item L, so for the minutes, I would like to strike item L as well. I'm striking item K and L. Yes, for Nikki, the comment is not due yet, so we're striking K.
Okay, so for anybody that didn't hear that, we are striking items K and L.
AK now.
A, K, and L.
And A. So we are striking items A, K, and L on our agenda. Yeah.
With that, we are not taking action on this item. And I no longer.
Those short meetings more.
That'll be, we'll talk about the 21st. Having to do a short meeting on the 21st. And when we do, that's where I'm going to ask that we just Zoom that meeting. It could be like a simple 1 or 2 item thing. It's doing the PKS reduction. The requirement for us to do, but we don't have any. Yeah.
I think it's on the second.
22nd. 22nd. And we would do a Zoom meeting. It's not a, it's a kind of almost like a special meeting. There's just a couple small agenda things. There's no reason to reconvene. We're not going to know a lot more by Monday.
So we are for sure going to have a meeting.
Yeah, we will do June 22nd. And we'll do Zoom only.
So I'm gonna be out of town, so
Yeah, Mr. Colvin will be doing exactly the same thing. So we will have a meeting on June 22nd at 5 p.m. A Zoom only meeting. There will be no meeting here in the Okay. Motion to approve the agenda, striking items A, K, and L.
I'm looking at the agenda striking items.
I'll second. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? And all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Second call. And carried. Twice. Mr. Shaw, you check it with
We're in the back.
Ready, salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
To the
States.
flag of the United States of America.
Stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are at board comments and happily start. Mr. Colvin, do you have any comments?
None at this time.
Mr. Chavez.
No, the kids are in the water again for the otters. That's one good thing, but otherwise it's just forge ahead.
Sweet. Paul?
No, I just have a list of questions that maybe at the public comments I can ask. And then nothing's changed. I don't really have any board comments except for one. I know that everybody's been using one comment. Mr. Westerberg, And I also heard that soccer is planning on having a soccer season.
At this point,
So,
At school meeting,
no, I meant
because the real league, oh,
For myself, I've received a number of phone calls related to the COVID plan, whether or not we should open school, not open school. And I'm encouraging everyone to continue to stay informed, look at the plan as it develops, talk to people that are on the reopening committee, bounce your ideas off of them, explain your concerns, and try to find ways that it may work. Again, look for solutions to the problems, not just complain about the problems. Please be part of the solution. It won't be until July 17th when this board meets to make a decision on whether or not we're going to move forward with the COVID plan or move forward with an alternative, sometime, whether it be a remote learning plan or something. But between now and then, again, please stay in contact with your labor group, stay in contact with folks that are on that committee, and again, please work hard to be part of that solution. We will, I'm confident that with all the information that's coming out, we will find a way to make the best decision that we can make that allows us to provide education in a safe manner for everybody concerned. At least that is my hope. So, stay focused. That's all I got. Superintendent comments.
yeah, well, the only certainty is uncertainty. And so for us, it's preparing the most COVID-friendly environment we can, financially and academically. All three of those pieces have to go together. We can't just do total only safety with no academic concerns or no financial concerns. All three of them have to work together. And so we do have a plan we're looking at. I found out yesterday I'm going to have to submit our plan to the county health officer. And I have to submit that in in July sometime. And who knows what's going to be at the end of August. There is some general consensus things we've already done. Smaller class size is our goal. The teacher having fewer contacts a day, which in elementary means a smaller class size, single class. In middle school and high school, it's seeing fewer teachers in a day and staggering times at the high school, because regardless of what we did during the school day, at 7:40, we'd have 450 kids at the high school. So it wouldn't matter what cohort group we go into unless we fix that from the get. So there's a lot of possibilities, but we have to know what we can staff, what can we afford to do. And so at this point, we're putting ideas down there to what to do. My biggest concern is getting a large response from parent surveys and teacher surveys, so we get information back. Our biggest wild card in scheduling is figuring out, do parents want an independent study program, or do they want to be back in school regularly? We're not going to be able to provide a system as we have in the past, where Alex can say, I want my child in independent study, and after 2 or 3 weeks go, I don't like this, it's not working, let's just jump back into the regular school. We can't do that. We have to staff those cohorts, and once we put them together, they need to stay together.
At least for a trimester.
At least for a trimester. So if they choose independent study, it has to be for that 12-week block, or at least 6 weeks for sure at the high school, till we reshuffle. So there's a time frame that they're going to have to lock in. Parents are going to have to do that. There's no other way for us to staff it. And so there's pluses and minuses with everything. You know, having fewer classes a day should help high school kids perform better. Having smaller class sizes, K-5, should help kids. Those are good academic things regardless of COVID. However, the financial impact is is big, and the academic part, when you have to take kindergarten and make it half day. That's an academic impact that we have to work on. So everything has a plus and a minus, and nothing's locked in stone. We did negotiate with WTA. We came up with a tentative agreement. They're working through their procedures to come up with a meeting date to do their ratification. Once they ratify, then I'll bring it to us to ratify. And so, you know, that's done. But our work isn't done. Our major issues still remaining are every building has to use professional development to get teachers ready for the fall. We can't use those days in late August. We have to spend those days as soon as possible. So today and over the next day or two, all of the principals are meeting with their teachers to talk about what kind of professional development they need to do, when they can do it. It's going to be different in every building. This isn't a scenario where I'm bringing somebody in from the outside to present to the staff. Gloucester is going to look different than Bechtel. High school is going to look different than Bechtel. The high school needs to be trained in a program called Canvas. They're the only ones using it. Nancy and Kathy may decide the best thing to do is to have a meeting with everybody and then have separate meetings by grade level and let the teachers by grade level get prepared. Those are building decisions. My advice to them was to use our 4 PD days before August. Use them as soon as you can to give teachers enough time to get ready. The other thing there's been pretty unanimous agreement on is to look at our calendar and roll back 3 days. In other words, start August 31st. I think there's some value. You either want to start late or you want to start early. If you start early, you might build in days, so if something hits the fan in December, you've got a bank of days you can. Colleges are using that right now. Most colleges are using an early enrollment date. They're starting now in August where they normally haven't before. They're starting in August and ending their semester after Thanksgiving. And so they're being off from Thanksgiving through New Year's, hoping that that's flu season to return in January. You know, we don't have that luxury as a public school, but our calendar is so far back, 25th was our first date to begin with. Ukiah is actually starting August 13th. I think by August 31, we'll have some data from 30 miles away that'll be pretty pertinent. And it's either going to be a yes or a no. And so we'll let them get out there, and I hope it works well for them. If it doesn't, it'll help us prepare. If it, you know, we'll start the 31st and see where we go. But other than that, we're getting a lot of stuff done. Maintenance custodial are fixing, repairing everything we can get done. The high school is almost completely done for next year. You know, I'm really pleased with what we're getting done. We've trenched across the track all the way over to the baseball field and hooked in our water. And we're now using the Green Giant to water. So that will be significant savings for us. And so my issue right now is figuring out staffing in rooms, especially at Blossom. That's my most problematic scheduling staff. Just because we need to put additional staff in place and create classrooms where there aren't right now. Everything's.
I could, if you have one more thing, I should probably draw out there. I spent 2 hours yesterday in a webinar with the California School Board Association. They were addressing all of this COVID-19 stuff, also the federal and state budgets. And the truth of the matter is, there virtually nothing came out of that meeting that we don't already know about. They did say that the the legislature passed the budget, pretty much a Newsom's desk. Unfortunately, that budget, in order for us to avoid cuts, relies very heavily on federal government coming through and backfilling the deficit. The quote, experts at CSBA do not believe that's going to occur. And quite frankly, it's pretty much in that same boat. The worst part about that whole plan, though, is if Newsom approves that budget, it's possible we wouldn't even know until basically April 1st whether or not the cuts are going to occur or not. August or April 1st of next year. So in other words, we could go merrily on our way, spending money almost like it's a normal year, and then in April they could tell us, oh, by the way, you're not going to get that $1.6 million.
But they want to be fiscally responsible.
So unfortunately, some districts could bank on that and find themselves in very big trouble on April 1st. On the other hand, we could do all the things that we're doing now and come out April 1st to find out that it's necessary, which would be equally frustrating because the programs that are in place are successful. So what it boils down to is there's really no good direction coming out of any level of government for this whole scenario.
Well, financially, though, Alex, we've already put ourselves in a position
Oh yeah, I'm not
for the
sure
hit.
that.
And so for us, if the federal government actually does come through with their rainbow, for us, it just means we can reinstate stuff we didn't have. My advice would be, obviously, we don't bank on that. We're not banking on a maybe. And on top of that, the news from the federal government, especially Republicans, if there is going to be a second wave of this, if January, February, we hit a flu season, they need to have something left to be able to do then. Not now. Not now. We're actually starting to spend money and generate economy. Now is not the time to spike the economy. The time is to save the economy if they need to in February.
There's a lot of arguments pro and con to all of these things, how they all flesh out in the bean counters at the top, trying to figure it out. Unfortunately, we just have to sit back and take it when they give it to us. But in the meantime, again, we had this discussion before about, if they want to mandate us doing something, then I'm like, fine, COD, cash on delivery, we have to do what we want us to do. But so it boils down to a show us the money. Just that simple.
And so the fact that I put some time on this with deferral instead of and how would that affect us? I mean,
It boils down to
in the past,
they just off, it's an IOU.
yeah, and you get money from the county to continue the cash flow or what?
Only if the county has it.
Okay, well, usually they maintain a pretty healthy balance with all the way,
What the way that typically works is if the district goes out for a bond, they receive a bunch of money that sits there until they spend it. They don't spend all that bond money right away. That money basically sits there in the county coffers, drawing interest. And say we're in between getting enough money from the state. It's coming in a couple of weeks. We need to make payroll now. They make agreements with districts that have a bond money to temporarily loan that money out to other districts that are going to basically pay it back within a very short period of time. So it basically just allows you to maintain cash flow.
But we got to pay it back.
well, yeah, no, but
And I would be very leery that the county will have their own revenue to do that. Especially the cities and all of the cities. The city of Willits has some major financial problems because all this loss of local taxation revenue is devastating their budget.
It has almost every small city.
Our small town is really struggling at the city level for revenue. And I could see the county bailing the city out before school. Because the cities have an obvious, the schools have an obvious place where they're gonna get replenished from the state. The states aren't, the state government's not gonna replenish the city.
So these budget woes, they're not over.
And other than, we're gonna hit fund balance way harder than we want to next year, but we've done enough to prepare for what, unless it gets worse, we've done enough to prepare to be fine for next year.
So to clarify, I would say we've done enough to get through next year.
Right,
The following years immediately become an issue if we were to stay in this assumed or projected revenue based on the governor's proposals. But even if we see the legislature's budget be the final product, which is the one Alex was referring to, we, like he mentioned, have the potential for facing future cuts. And I expect those issues to remain on the table in those following years as well. We will see those discussions back and forth as they try to figure out what approach to take to balance their state budget. And a huge piece of that is the cash deferrals, as well as other types of actual revenue cuts. And so, you know, the impact of that, you know, no matter what they decide this year, I think that same issue is going to be up for discussion each of those years.
I'm just 1 year at a time now in budgets. Nikki's projecting out. I'm just trying to make through to a year from June. She's a business manager. She's ultra conservative by nature.
Thank you, Nikki. We appreciate that. Moving on to item B, boy, consideration of resolution 2019-20-22, elementary K assignments.
It's K8.
K8?
See the asterisk
Yeah,
there?
it's normally above the 8, yes. So K assignments. Just some background quickly, Mark?
Yeah.
You have your board report there for more.
This is elementary assignments, multiple subjects, and this has to do with a couple middle school teachers doing multi-subject. Their names without naming. This is an annual thing we do to make sure that I believe these guys are doing
I think they have a multi-subject.
they have a single subject.
Okay, so then they need because it's a.
These are the single subjects, because the one is a social studies, the other one is an English. And they need to be multi-subject for middle school.
It requires teachers with multiple subjects, standard elementary education, single subject.
And they're among those that are on the
They require waivers, even though they're fully credentialed. They're not fully credentialed.
So can I talk to that for just a second?
Sure.
These are teachers who hold multiple subject credentials. And if they have units in the single subject area, in particular in social studies and language arts, then they can, you as a local board can authorize them or certify that they teach a single subject. And it's for my social studies and language arts teacher.
So do they have multiple subjects and they want to teach single?
Correct.
Or want them to teach single, or is it, do they have single and want to do multiple?
They have a multiple subject credential.
They have multiple subject credentials and they need to teach single subjects.
And normally, in order to teach that single subject, they have to have a minimum number of units in that, correct, Maria?
Yeah, normally to teach that single subject, you would have to have a single subject credential, but they don't have a single subject credential. They have a multiple subject credential. So they have to be authorized by a local board. It's called a local board's authorization, because they have a certain number of units in that subject, social studies and language arts. You can then certify them to be able to teach those. That doesn't mean you give them a credential. You just they have to first of all want to do that, and then you can have them teach that, and it's not against regulations.
So these people have the hours, they just don't have the CSET, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so when they've been employees of this.
Yeah. One has not.
The
So
motion
then
for,
they're not, well, I'm sorry, but when they're not applying for, they're not among the waiver group. They're an additional 2 more people.
They're not applying for a waiver. They're applying for a local board's authorization. You're a local board.
Okay. These are the people, they are fully certified credentialed teachers. But
Yes, they are.
they are multi-subject teachers who we use in a single subject fashion
Correct.
because they have the hours necessary to do so. What they haven't done is pass the CSET, so that's part of their credential. But they do meet the hour requirement to do that. And you can do that in middle school. You can't do that in high school, can you, Maria?
I know you can only do that in middle school. Middle school
Right.
has
It's only a middle.
different set of rules for certification.
so are they on a track to get fully authorized so that they don't have to do this?
I didn't hear that.
Are they on a track to get fully certified credential with the CSET?
They don't have to. It's not a waiver. It's a local board authorization. You're actually authorizing them because they have this content knowledge. They just don't have the single subject credential. They can be, especially, if they're going to go for more than,
Here's the,
I don't know. I don't know that they have to.
They're
No.
fully credentialed. It's a board decision at the middle school level to allow somebody with the hours to be able to teach a single subject fashion.
if they have a minimum of 12 units or 6 upper division of graduate.
Right.
And that's because the district doesn't want to hire any more teachers that would already have what is required, or because there's been some
I
shuffling.
can't hear Paula.
Huh?
I'm sorry. I can't hear Paula.
I'm sorry, well, then that's because one of them is new to the district, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's because the only way for that person to be hired was to have that person agree to do either English or social studies. So what I'm questioning is the decision to take someone out of where they've already been tested and don't need to ask permission by the board for the favor of being a different class or a different cluster of classes is because the district didn't want basically or can't afford it to hire different teachers
Can't find.
or couldn't find the teacher that they needed. So
You need to understand that in a middle school schedule, we have a combination of single subject people
Yeah.
and multi-subject. The bulk of them are multi-subject. We try to use single subject teachers for those courses because they're high school preparation ready. This allows her to use them in either single or core teaching. It can do either or. So it's great flexibility in the schedule. That's one of the problems at the middle school if you bring in single subject teachers. For example, the 8th grade is a smaller 8th grade this year. It could run in 3 sections. Well, that doesn't necessarily justify a full 8th grade assignment. So using a combination of those folks and people like this, you can provide single subject instruction or multi-subject core teaching. So there has to be some of them at the middle school. We can't exist with your either or. These are kind of people who can do either or.
And depending on your needs, that could very well change from year to year, and you don't change your certification from year to year. So like he said, we have a smaller 8th grade class. That means that they have to teach another grade level as well. And so that's why they allow that to happen in middle school.
And in a few years, it'll switch because we have a really large third grade. When that really large third grade hits 6th grade, we're going to have to core a lot more teachers than we have now. But when they're 8th grade, we're going to have to single subject a lot more teachers than we do.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Also move.
Motion by Mr. Chavez. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Hume. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Pardon me. This is a resolution. Chavez. It's to be a roll call vote. So we'll start with Paula.
Aye.
Me.
Aye.
Mr. Chavez.
Aye.
Mr. Colvin.
Aye.
And myself. Aye.
Aye.
Good, thank you. We're moving on to next item Charlie. Consideration and possible action on resolution 2019-20-23 regarding reduction/elimination of classified employee services. This is your PE positions.
Yes. Yeah, we are reducing elementary PE, and the PE teacher from the elementary is moving to Bethel. And so, again, he moved to into a place where there was somebody less senior than him. And so it's part of the process of not having elementary PE. And I'm hoping this is not an annual thing, but at least for right now, it's a way for us to reconcile some financial issues and change some staff to help us reduce costs.
So you move to a position where you bump somebody?
Yes.
Where that individual go?
The bump person, I'm 95% positive he's going to be our high school years. He is a wonderful young teacher who we had no desire to not have. And so that was part of the program, was that we would bump him, that teacher would move to the high school.
So again, our goal with this is to help balance the financial burden of the budget cuts, with the idea that when and if the state and federal government make our budget whole again, this will be one of the programs we will stay.
It's one of those that'll set in the priority list of where we want to go. And along with that, again, if the HEROES Act or whatever they call it from the federal government would pass, all that would really allow us to do is to reinstate it. And so that's the issue for us, is we have to make space for the people, because our goal is not to lose anybody, but we are going to have to displace some folks. This is actually a really good move. We have a really hard time finding people for high school special ed in this year's program. He's got a great personality. He's young, energetic, knows the kids. He's going to be a great match.
Looking for a motion to approve.
I move we approve.
I'll second.
Moved by Bob and seconded by Robert. Any further discussion? We'll call for the vote. Mr. Colvin.
Aye.
Mr. Chavez.
Aye.
Ms. King.
Aye.
Me. And myself, aye. We are at item D, David. Approval of provisional internship permit for Elisa Smith, education specialist, moderate severe, certificated staff for middle grade.
This is an easy one. This one is easy. This is a graduate of Willits. It is a employee, elementary teacher's child, has worked in this room, and I think going to be a great addition. So, this is one of those special education positions that's super hard to find certified qualified for, and I think she's going to do a great job.
And Sue, she's in a program to get
Yeah.
credential.
Because she is a PIP, she has to have a program she's involved in. And she is, got mentors in place, got heroes in place, has Kelly as her direct supervisor and Maria. So,
Is she going to do it in middle school or
Yeah.
after?
middle school.
Has she been temporarily in that position in the spring?
Yeah, she's been in the room, but she is well aware of what goes on. She's been part of the room, so I think it's an excellent thing for us.
So what happens, excuse me, so what happens when the decision comes up or the thought comes up that you no longer want to keep the person who's employed in the district for whatever reason, then, I mean, I know the promise is like a 5-year position. Or 3 years. I forget what we did last year. That's what it was. So how does that work out? It's the same as a non-year elected.
They're just like every other teacher and every other absent.
Okay,
They
they
have
just
a-
stay on the first column of the salary schedule?
Well, there's 2 columns there. There's a year 1 and a year 2.
They stay there
So they're credentialed and then they get on one.
And they're treated just like any other non-reelected, that's what comes up.
Yep.
And they also, do they do general? Yeah, that's that, yeah.
They have all kinds.
They do that too.
Yeah, they have
I mean, it's
more.
like-
Paula, can you speak up? This is Kelly, and I just want to make sure I understand your questions.
Yeah, no, thank you.
She just wants to know, are they involved in BITSA, besides or PIP program and all those things? We treat them as a regular teacher.
Absolutely. The tricky part this year is we have a lot of them. So we are using some of our wonderful retired special ed teachers to do the BITSA supervision. But they'll get, they will have the same level of training as any other teacher in the district. It's a process.
Well, I'm just curious to know if we employ them on for 1 year, 2 years, at what point does their period start for when they become tenant?
Right now. They have a 2-year window for us, just like everybody. And our people, generally speaking, TIPs and STIPs have been the most consistent with staying with us. But they're just like every other teacher. You have to go through a 2-year window to gain tenure status.
Even though they don't have the credential, they get tenure at the district.
They would not get tenure until after they have the full credential. When they do this process, the PIP happens first, then they join an internship program, which is essentially a credential program that allows them to work while they're obtaining the credential, and then they get their preliminary credential.
Once but they're still in, but they have to get their credential through their program or they'll no longer be able to serve. They have to continue to do what they're supposed to do. If they don't, they're not credential, and we can't waiver them.
And that's a part of the reason why we need the state to send us, or we need to have the Sonoma State internship program. So they're all a part of that. It's not like there are new people coming in,
Well,
or they're not a part of that yet.
they're PIPs right now. They're not part of that Sonoma State yet, Nikki, right until their 3rd year. Isn't that correct?
It depends on what program that they join. We have several interns who started off as PIPs. Some of them are using the SCO and Lake County Be a Teacher program. Some of them have gone through National University. We had one who was a couple of years back went through Dominican. So it depends on the program that they choose and how long the coursework takes, you know, whatever program they're in. Of our 5 SDC teachers, 3 of them have been just amazingly plowed through, and the one we have at Blosser now is completely credentialed and ready to get her clear this coming year. So that's what I anticipate for Elisa Smith as well.
So, and they have to go through their 2-year probationary stuff. But they also, if they don't have their certification, they have to get their certification and stay on track to do that. If they don't, they basically aren't hireable. They're not rehirable by them. So they have certain timelines and stuff they have to fulfill, and if they don't, it isn't a question about rehire or tenure or anything. They have to stay on track to get their certification.
That track is 2 years.
Well, their first track is 2 years long. It could be longer than that if they start as a PIP, work through that, then they get into their, what's the other acronym I'm looking for?
PIP?
No,
After PIP, they usually are full intern.
Then they become an intern, and in their intern process, they have to stay on track and meet their criteria to continue to be eligible for a waiver or a certificate.
Regardless of whatever we do now, if they're employed for 2 years, technically, in 2 years they've got their certificate, they got their full certified, they're becoming.
There are people.
On the other hand, if they go to the end of that 2-year period and haven't completed all that stuff, there may be some other avenues that allow them to be employed, and you get the rest of that stuff. But at some point, if they don't get the full certification,
We won't be able to. It would be reemployed, but the issue is getting to that level, they have to do the course. They have to stay on track, and if they don't, we can't employ them because Laura can't even apply for a certificate or a waiver or anything.
Involved in the court case, or they're just knowing
We can't even do a waiver for them. They're not waiverable because they didn't follow their under
progress towards
once they confusion of whether they do that after that.
as long as they can maintain a certificate, whether it's a waiver or whatever it is. If they don't do the obligation, Laura can't give them that endorsement, that certificate to stay employed. I believe, and Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought Deb told me in Ukiah that 40% of her special ed staff might be fifth and waivers.
Yeah, that sounds about right. We have, right now, we only have 3 fully credentialed special ed staff. Everyone else is either a PIP or an intern.
Yeah. That's the environment we're in. There are just not much of special ed teachers out there who are fully qualified. Ukiah has those really high, or not Fort Bragg, those tiered classrooms that are really tough. All 3 of their people were sick last year. All 3 of them. It's really, it's a tough market. if somebody's looking to get a teaching job, if you're fully successful, you can.
I want to add, though, that what has been a huge success, and I have to give it to all of our district staff, is that we have grown our own, and our most successful special ed teachers have been folks who have come, born and raised in Willits, have been a special ed instructional assistant, and have then, we've encouraged them to, get their bachelor's and go back to school to get a credential. So the folks that we have that are PIPs are locals, and they understand our students and our community. And so we're doing a lot of good succession planning, and that's the case with this particular person that's on the agenda for today. But several of our special ed staff have our local people who have come up through the ranks and have been working as instructional aides in special ed, and it's served us well.
Okay, any further discussion? A motion to approve item D, item D, David.
I move we approve item D.
Move and all in favor?
Aye.
There's a resolution. No, I don't think it is. It's a resolution. No, it's not. No, very good. All passed. Aye. Okay, we are item E. Nick, you tell us about the budget.
Okay, give me a moment while I get my screen share set up.
So Nikki, I gave them the multi-year projection, the flow chart on
The cash.
and I gave them the cash flow worksheet as well as the full packet.
Okay.
And I didn't strike through. I just removed
We have your,
the stuff we had to remove.
What did you say about the strikeouts?
Yeah. I didn't remove it. I removed it instead of did a strike through on it.
Oh, great.
So, all right. So,
Okay, let's see. Hang on here. Share. Okay, are you guys seeing the
screen.
your projection?
Yep, your full screen. You're good.
Okay. So this is what we looked at really last week already. So this is just a different view of it. And I think it's just a little bit easier to see than the official state forms that we are required to submit. I do want to point out I did a very minor correction from last week, and it was created a positive impact. As you will see, the change in fund balance for next year is about $14,000 or $15,000 less of a deficit than what we had looked at. So very minor amount, but it is a little revision. So I wanted to point that out to you all. Are there any questions on the budget now that you guys have had more time with it?
And Nikki, I want to tell them that I asked Nikki to do this sheet for you. This is the basically one sheet overview of budget and projection. So you get a sense of, in one piece of paper, where we're headed. And it shows unrestricted fund balance, restricted. It gives you kind of a really good overview.
Right. The one that we have to submit to the state, they split it out on multiple pages. There's a page for unrestricted, a page for restricted, and there's a page that combines them, but quite literally combines them, as opposed to allowing you to see them in the separate columns like this. So this view is just a nice single page compilation of all of that in one place instead of having to flip through many pages.
What's the other outgo that if you have the, there's a 94 to 424,000.
Mark, can you relay the question since you're closer to the microphone?
You know, the one under, yeah, right above total expenditures, there's 73, other outgo, it shows $324,579.
Right under total expenditures, Nikki, the other outgo.
Oh, yes, that is actually, so that's indirect cost. And so what you see is that that comes in as essentially a negative expense on the unrestricted side, because what happens is the indirect cost rate gets charged against all of the restricted programs. So you see it as a positive expense on the restricted side, and a negative amount because it relieves expense on the unrestricted side. They don't match exactly because we're looking at general fund only. And so that 324,000 is a combination of both the 265,000 from the restricted side, as well as the indirect cost that comes in from our Fund 11 and Fund 12 programs. Is there anything else that we want to look at on the multi-year projection? I wasn't planning to go in detail because we did look at it, I think, more closely last week.
Nikki, will you explain where food service hits the budget?
Sure. We see that represented in the general fund in the transfers out. So that is under other sources and uses, transfers out 7610 to 7699. So the negative 184,381. That is the amount that is leaving the general fund to support the food service program next year.
And that
We had a much higher amount in this year because we had a higher starting amount to begin with. I think it was in the $270,000 or $80,000 range, and we then also are anticipating some losses due to COVID and the campus closures. And so it ended up being even higher. For next year, what we're anticipating is that we have some changes going into place, which include bidding out our food, as well as doing the different production models that Mark has talked to you guys about, which we hope will improve our efficiency. So we are anticipating that to be a lesser amount than what we had for this year.
We are bringing down food service cost $100,000.
Yeah, I know that was the
And
plan, I just didn't see it.
whatever I need to do to make that happen, it's going to happen because it is so impeded the rest of our budget now. And remember that we're walking into the $15 an hour minimum wage. So their wages are going up. And we are still going to make, if we bid correctly, we produce our food in a smarter fashion, we distribute it in a better fashion, we will save this. We're already in the process of, we have a food bid out already. July 15th or something is when we get our bid in. We've already got our equipment in place to make us more productive. We have the truck to deliver. We are all in place to make that happen. Shortening our menu down to fewer choices, better choices. We're in a good place. And food service just needs to make it happen.
The food is still being available for all the rest of the summer, right?
Right. We do our seamless summer as well.
Yeah. Okay, well, so I saw something that said you could go,
Blossom. Yeah.
so it's not happening here.
No, there's nobody on site here.
Are they still rotating cooks, et cetera, or are they using?
They employ people for the summer. They post a position.
Right, usually for summer school though, so this will.
Yeah, we're only going to serve out of Blossom. We're going to do 8 to 10 breakfast and 11 to 1 lunch. Everything's going to Blossom. And things like every building, there's no food service product coming out that's not running through our point of sale system. So there's going to be no lost paperwork. We're not going to get dinged in audits. We're going to get clean and get revenue back. And we've already talked, Christy and I have already talked, and I've talked with the principals. If we're in a COVID mode, for example, I'll just use the kindergartner for example. If we have half-day kindergarten, we're sending the kindergartners home with lunch. We're also, the kids coming in for the second shift kindergarten are going to start with lunch. And so in that 20 to 25 minute gap there, we'll have to get into the rooms to sterilize. But we're going to hit both ends of that. In the high school, if the high school goes to their Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday's their remote day, Thursday, Friday, when they leave Tuesday, we're going to send kids down, the 2 o'clock kids who leave, we're sending everybody down to the cafeteria for their meal for Wednesday. And then at 3 o'clock, we're sending the other group down for their meal at home on Wednesday. So we're putting procedures into place to not get killed in food service. Enough's enough.
Yeah.
So is the summer food program, do people get to use it?
It depends. It was slow at the start this year. It's normally a lot better because New Wester is at the building. Summer schools used to run generally right as soon as school got out for short runs. Now, because of the COVID world, we're rolling it back further. And so, not what it used to be, but we never lose money on it. It's always, everybody's 100%. And if you don't have to be in a program, anybody in town can come as long as you're 18 or below and still in schools, you can come and get a meeting. So there's really no restriction on it.
But the Worcester around the outside is clear.
No.
Is that not really a big money or?
I don't know what they do. They just come and ask me for the space.
Yeah.
I'm not really involved in that, but without them on campus at Blosser, there's going to be less food service.
My guess is they were.
Yeah, I just got some conflicting stuff and I'm thinking.
No, they don't involve me. The other thing that hurt it is Kids Club is not their summer program. So if Kids Club and New Wester are there, we have a pretty robust summer.
Continue on, Nikki.
So the final thing I would say before we move to the next page is just to reiterate what I said last week, which is that the LCFF revenue projections that are incorporated into this model are based on the governor's May revision. So at this time, we know that, the legislature had put forth their budget and, they're still negotiating. The governor has not signed that. So there's really no way to incorporate that until action takes place on that. So in order to be conservative, this remains that May revision projection, which incorporated a large cut, and the governor's proposal had been, if federal funding comes through, that some of the funding to us would be reinstated. So just want to clarify that that is still what is included here. And the other thing I wanted to show you is we talked earlier. Oh, was there a question?
Yeah, would you make sure you do the cash flow one?
Yep, that's the one I just put up now. So, well, I guess I'll show you really briefly. This form here, we won't go into details. This gives you a lot more detail of how the cash flow projection comes to be, but essentially for planning purposes, we're looking at the projected ending balance for each month, which is this row along the bottom. So that has been incorporated here. You can see the projected ending monthly balances for cash. And I have overlaid what our average monthly payroll is.
Let us flip to the page. You're on the cash flow worksheet, right?
Yes, this is the one that has the graph embedded in it.
I put them out of order. They had the graph second, so.
Ah.
So, I mean, that's the one up there.
Is Paula asking a question?
No, I was just, the one on the screen is not quite the same. I mean, it's still the big report.
The first page, the
Yeah.
one on the screen,
Yeah.
the first page.
Yeah, Nikki, you need to re-screen, reshare.
Oh. I'm not really sure how to.
If you click on share screen,
Or the,
it'll give you options.
Okay. All it says is you are, oh, here we go. New share. Oh, got it. Got it. Well, this is a new skill that I'm learning on the fly. Are we there?
That is the flow chart with the graph.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's do
Okay.
this.
So this shows us what we are projecting for the ending cash balances for each month for next year. And you can see that there's a couple spots where we're under $1 million, and that has to do with the schedules from the payments from the state. And so this is concerning to me. Now, I will say these are the cash balances for a month after a payroll has been run in that month. But I still think it is a good metric for us to look at. When we see that graph, the line that we're seeing overlaid, it is this average monthly payroll. So that's the cost of 1 month of payroll, inclusive of salary and benefits, the $1.4 million. And so when you see that overlaid against the monthly ending balances, we see a couple areas of concern, and that would be November and June. So November typically always is a lower cash month, but our balances have been high enough the last several years that we have not had to be overly concerned. And as we move into next year, that does start to change. It gets us a lot closer. June also is low, and that is because we are hearing that we will be experiencing June deferrals, in which they will actually be not giving us the final amount of our 2021 payments until the next fiscal year. And so, you know, this is something that as we move forward and with the loss of revenue, with the state doing cash deferrals, with our fund balance decreasing at a rapid pace, cash flow is going to really become something that we're going to be watching very closely.
Yeah. And so I'm not used to the word deferral. I'm used to the state saying, sorry, we don't have it. This is all we're giving. This, I assume in California, deferral means we'd like to give it to you, but we can't. It's kind of like the wimpy, I'll gladly pay for the hamburger.
On Tuesday.
Well, essentially what it does, they use it to balance their budget for a given fiscal year. So it kicks the can down the road for them. It allows them to show that they're meeting whatever revenue obligation they said that they would make to the agencies, while not giving the cash out until the following fiscal year. So we might not see the payments of those deferrals until July, August, September. And it makes us whole in the big picture. It allows them to balance their budget, but it puts us in a real cash crunch.
But if they're in a cash crunch the next year, they're going to defer again, right?
Yes, that's correct. When we went through this during the last recession, there were several years in a row of deferrals, and they got bigger for a while. And it wasn't until the state began, you know, going back into a growth pattern that they were able to start restoring that and paying down the deferrals essentially. And it can sometimes take a couple of years for the state to get them fully paid down, depending on how far they push those deferrals.
Okay, well, that'll be a new world for me. I'm not used to that. Either you get it or don't get it.
Well, and that's why one of, I share some of the concerns that Alex had mentioned regarding the legislature's, approach to this. To me, I prefer the governor's approach, which is more conservative and saying, we're not going to bank on it until we know that the federal government's coming through. And if they do, great, we will pass that through to the districts. The legislature is trying to make these commitments about what the funding will be, but not necessarily able to follow through on that because they don't necessarily have the cash to do so. And I think we're going to see deferrals in either scenario, but the deferrals in the legislature's proposal will be much more drastic. And so what will happen if their plan is signed by the governor is that we would see that they'll change what our revenue projections will be, and it will look better in some ways than it really is, because they won't be giving us the cash on our normal schedule, and we may experience periods of the year where we're very low in cash because of it. So, any other questions about the cash flow? I'm having a hard time hearing if somebody is speaking.
We're talking about how we experienced it through the MA money, the deferrals.
Oh, the MA was a different situation because they were actually trying to work out what the claims process essentially would be and what amounts of funding would be approved. And so when that was happening with MA, the state and the federal government essentially were in negotiations because there were some agencies essentially that the federal government felt was overcharging the program. And so they were redeveloping the whole thing. And that's really what caused those delays.
I was hoping we were going to get the 1.2 million in unfunded mandates back.
Well, and that's something that we have seen. So the unfunded mandates were actually stagnant for several years. And then our last governor was working on paying that debt down through one-time payments each year. And we have not seen those now since the new governor has been in place.
Not likely to either.
Yeah, I don't anticipate seeing those anytime soon.
Okay, you're back on track, Nikki.
So we do. Okay, so this is our certification page. Are you guys seeing that? And so Mark, you were able to actually remove the language, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so you won't see the language that's not there, but I do just want to let you all know that we have the requirement for passing the LCAP. Typically there's some language here regarding that, and because the state has said that now we won't be doing LCAP until later, they're pushing back that approval process. So essentially the state told us, okay, well, modify the language on your certification form to account for that. So just a heads up that, the language looks slightly different than normal, and it just removes some of the reference to the timeline that we now won't be following. I'm thinking, unless anybody has questions on the criteria and standards, the criteria and standards is a large form. It's 30 pages or so. And essentially what it does is it walks districts through analyzing to ensure that districts are looking at all of our assumptions, whether districts are being thoughtful in the way that they are projecting their ADA, their enrollment, accounting for variances from year to year in expenditures and revenues. And then it also asks for us to consider whether we have any red flags, essentially, or things that we should be aware of, fiscal indicators. And so all of that gets condensed onto our certification form here. And it will tell you as you go through whether the item was met or not met. And any item that says not met, it's not necessarily a bad thing. All it is saying is that we were outside of a statistical variance and we were required to provide some type of explanation. And so, for instance, when we look at revenues for sure are outside of the normal variance because we obviously took an enormous reduction on LCFF revenue. And so it gives us the opportunity to just explain what those things are. So if you have any questions as you go through this is very standard, but if there were any questions, any of the not met explanations would be in the larger criteria and standards document. But this essentially just highlights all of the things that we should be looking at to ensure that we are staying fiscally solvent. And yeah, I don't think there's anything else on that form that needs any particular explanation.
The guidelines you build the budget to, right?
What was that?
It's the guidelines you use to build the budget.
Correct. It just ensures, it came into place back when it became a requirement that districts do multi-year projections. And so it just ensures that districts are not throwing wild numbers into, or not being thoughtful in their approach for those projections. And it prompts you to look at various components and then if there are things that sit outside those normal patterns, allows you to respond to it, because there are plenty of times where there's very legitimate reasons why that happens. If you have staffing changes, you have funding changes. We had our enrollment changed from 1819 into 1920, and so things like that. So pretty standard. I don't know that any of the other items are things that really require review. There is a form that we've given the board that will be signed by, I believe, the clerk or the president, which just states that we certify we carry workman's comp insurance for our employees. And I think that's all of the new information from what was already distributed.
And so we need to sign the first page of this where the two X's are and the places where we did the strike.
I don't remember, you have to look to see on the two different pages.
We're fine with that.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, I don't remember which signature it requires.
Then there's a workman's comp one where we have to sign. Which is
Yes, yeah, there's the two different signatures. Are there any other questions related to the budget before you guys vote?
I'm good with it, Nikki. Yep. I have one request.
What's that?
Only because I'm fairly comfortable with this in terms of just getting it tonight, but I would much prefer if we had this information a few days in advance so that we have an opportunity to study this and go through it with some details so you feel more comfortable with regard to adopting the budget. Well, I'm not sure everybody here is as comfortable with it as I am, but I just like to have the data a little bit earlier than the night of the meeting.
Good news is this first budget guesswork is going to have a lot of revisions.
And I expect exactly that.
I
know you put a great deal of effort into this, Nikki. That's not. I'm not complaining. It's just it would be a lot nicer if we had a few days to digest the information and be able to ask more intelligent questions of you when we actually have the presentation.
Absolutely. I really do try my best. It's a kind of a balancing act sometimes, which is that it feels sometimes if I start too soon with the budget, it almost immediately becomes obsolete and I have to redo a lot of things. And so there can feel like a tight window to where I am getting the most relevant and current information in, and then getting all of the sort of back end work done on it. But that is something I will definitely continue trying to improve on.
I appreciate it.
And the LCAP is still, the budget is still pushed back to January, right?
We have to, we did approve last time, basically telling the county what we're doing without that between now and then.
So I would entertain a motion to approve, to adopt the 2019-20 Willits USD budget. Motion?
This is the adoption of the
This is
20,
It's the
20, not 19, 20, it's
2021.
2021.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And
we're
I'm
working on the
tired of somebody
adoption.
put this agenda together. No, it just got changed so many times.
So we're
What is out tonight?
So we are working on item E, adoption of the 2020/21 Willits Unified School District budget. The typo on the agenda, and it's been motioned by Paula and seconded by Jeannie to approve. Do we have any further discussion? And hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And unanimous. Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Nikki.
She's not done yet.
Okay, item F, approval of resolution 2019-20 -26, the Education Protection Act, annual deal. Take it away.
So this is one that we are required to do each year. Essentially I believe it was 2012, there was some funding cuts that occurred and the governor restored the funding via some income and sales tax adjustments. And when those funds came back to districts, we were required to report on our planned use of them, as well as at the end of each year, we report on how they were used. We are not allowed to use them for administrative costs. And so we, like most all districts, use those funds directly for teacher salaries. So I believe that form was included in the agenda, and you essentially see that the funds for that come in, and then the only expenditure that they are used on is teacher salary.
We have that form, $1.874 million.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
We do have that form, shows $1.874 million. Okay.
Correct.
We have a motion to approve resolution 2019-20/26, education protection. I'll move to approve. Motion is seconded. Is there any discussion? This is basically a bookkeeping. Call for a vote. It is a resolution. Mr. Colvin?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez? Aye. Mindy? Aye. Myself, aye. Item G, approval of resolution 2019-20/27, authorization for 2019-20 inter-fund temporary cash transfer.
So G, H, I, and J are resolutions that we do each year along with our budget adoption. And they allow, some of them are for helping to wrap up current year, and some are in preparation for activity in the following year. The interfund temporary cash transfers allows us to, if we have any funds that will be negative cash when I am closing on June 30, allows us to do a temporary transfer from another fund in order to not have a negative balance, and then it is immediately reversed. So it's truly just an accounting function. The year-end transfers are to allow me to do all of the closing transactions, such as the contributions, the transfers out to food service, the indirect cost transfers from restricted to unrestricted. In the approval for the 2021 transfers, that allows me to do journal entries in next year as I begin just doing our regular general ledger maintenance throughout the year. And then the balances to a reserve allows us to appropriate the ending fund balance to a reserve so that we don't have to give any funds back to the state when we are closing the books.
Don't want to do that.
We do not want to do that. I think they're getting enough from us.
Okay, so I think we have to vote on each of these individually.
I believe so.
So interfund, item G, the interfund temporary cash transfers, approved. Somebody? Okay, seconded by G. And any discussion? And we'll call for the vote. Mr. Colbert?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez? Aye. Ms. Nunes? Aye. Ms. King?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Item H, again, like a motion to approve in a second. I'll move to approve. Motion is seconded. Any further discussion for item H, authorization for 2019-20 year-end transfer? Hearing none, call for the vote. Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez? Aye. Ms. Nunes? Aye. Ms. King? And myself, aye. Moving on to item I, approval of resolution 2019-20-29, authorization for 2021 transfers. And looking for a motion to approve in a second. Second, you. Any discussion on item I? Hearing none, call for the vote. Mr. Colvin?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez? Aye. Ms. Nunes? Aye. Ms. King? Aye. And myself, aye. And closing in on the end of this paperwork for money shuffle stuff. Approval of resolution number 2019-20-30, appropriating ending 2019-20 balance to a reserve. Approval of appropriating ending 2019-20 balances to a reserve. A motion to approve? I'll second. Seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. Mr. Colvin?
Aye.
Mr. Chavez? Aye. Ms. King? Aye. And myself, aye. And the item K was struck. We're at public comments for items not in the.
Yeah, probably but whatever, I received a number of phone calls, apparently a number of people. I tried to direct most of my calls to people in the community or elsewhere on this, but there was kind of good things that I sent you. This morning's was kind of good. And I reached out to two people who are hearing their plan clean to. If the committee has a name, I don't know, I'd say the clean. Anyway, there are big concerns. Some from the middle school about cleaning time, who was to do the cleaning. They didn't think the teachers were supposed to be writing down desks, and so on. But they were not able to do anybody 70,000 less. So you have to study anything else, meaning the third. And then there was similar concerns by some of the school that you have one big study that is not going to make it to 30 minutes, and teachers usually have to check whether they don't have 11 grade English all through classes. And there were a lot of real concerns about that. So, like I said, well, if you've got a plan, the one thing that was, it's kind of like you used to do in elementary school, you could touch it on the this is your class, you put it down there. But no one thought that was good. So anyway, that's just something that really needs to.
I think the ability to disinfect between middle school and high school classes is almost impossible.
Okay, well, so that was pretty much their response.
Well,
I agree
just
with
from
that.
the standpoint of who's going to do it, how are you going to hit 40 rooms at one time?
Exactly.
And so the real issue is if you maintain stable groups for those 6 weeks, you should be fine.
Okay, but maybe that's where I was understanding. A stable group, are you talking about the same kids?
The teachers going to see the same 3 sets of kids for 6 straight weeks.
It's 3 sets of kids,
3 sets.
which means period 1 and period 2. So when period 1 goes to someone else, you're still going to start having contact.
It'll always be the same 3. It'll always be the same 3 groups that are teachers. Here's the problem: is when they leave the room, forget about disinfecting. You're talking about contact now.
Yeah,
The greatest risk is person-to-person contact.
right.
There's a lesser risk that still exists from scanning surfaces. The part of the game is also one of the parts of the plan is put the temperature in the water.
Yeah.
The idea that if the temperature is in the window where you may be affected, you're not going to be. It's about no problem. Part of that is, I think, trying to minimize. Again, my point I'm trying to really get at here is, rather than get down into the details of the details, this is what this committee is. We're going to help you with details. Staff, maybe all the people that have to work out community details. More importantly, the question is how and if we're going to have to do it, how we're going to do it. Those are kind of details that administration can have. Probably the best thing I can really say is that we are not going to open up school and do anything less than the absolute minimum that's required by the state guidelines. It goes down to this. We're going to do everything we have to do and then try to do it. Okay?
I'll give you a really good example. Forget the classroom distance. If you're going into math, there's only 2 doors. One is this end, one is that. You're going to have a group of kids touching it. Unless we miraculously can have every door propped open every day, the front door at the high school where they come in.
All electric doors like taking.
I mean, there is no way to walk around and disinfect everything. But when you go to Safeway, and Safeway is a perfect example, when I grabbed that box of cookies I'm getting, I don't know if you grabbed it 5 minutes before that.
Yeah, because sometimes I think
When I get to
But,
And all those apples.
and I'll go to them.
but there's no possible way to have that, but that is like hospital grade disinfectant.
Well, even
We're not
worse,
gonna do
think about the use of the bathroom.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have a bathroom monitor. First we'll have the guy handing you a towel on it.
Exactly.
But the point is that you're gonna have someone who goes in and completely disinfect the bathroom after every single person you walk in. It's not practical.
We have to do reasonable things to provide reasonable things. Before the class comes in for the day, we'll disinfect in the room. But I have to be honest, that is about that much of these type of shit. It's nothing. Because as soon as the kids walk in the room, they bring in the people. Yeah. And that's really the issue. Is we're just trying to minimize the potential exposure. Not all exposure. We're trying to minimize the potential.
And our kids do, I mean, I know you still understand it, but something some with teachers, some with parents.
Teachers got their own.
Yeah, and that's aside.
Yeah.
And so there were some concerns about if the big deal, someone who knew about it, are they required to do it? If they are, it's only good to say 2 days. Because the district's telling me it's well, that's it.
We have purchased a mask for every student and 500 spares to give out as loaners in case they forget. The issue of do they have to have it on or not is going to be decided by the county health department. It's not us. And my guess is, if it's right now, it would be recommended. It depends on if we're in stage 3.2 or 2.8 or we have outbreaks. By the time we get to August 31, the mask issue is going to resolve itself. Either they're going to tell us, yes, we have to, or no, we don't.
There'll be a bunch of stuff around the map. If depending on the things we need to wear, then they also going to come back on. But next breath they're going to say, but if you can't wear it, so for example, you have or you have possibilities for that, the doctor gives you a notice to do that. Although we will hopefully have some alternatives.
We have 200 face shields. Every adult who wants a face shield should be able to have it. Right. Band around the head, face shield. Every adult will be able to have one. Those have never been required. I mean, if we're at the point where we're requiring face shields, we're probably not going to use that. And so, but I want every adult to have them. If they feel comfortable, if they want to get that level of protection, they want them to have it. But I have to be honest, when we start talking about disinfecting, I mean, they're not even very sure that you get it from touching. And the issue is the mask is a very simple issue. If you're outside and you're 6 feet away, a mask really isn't necessary. So if you go out for PT and you're 6 feet away, you don't need the mask. But can you keep it on if you still want to keep it on? Yeah, and so it's kind of like the Safeway. When I come out of Safeway, because they require a mask, do I take it off in the parking lot or do I take it off in the car? Do I leave it on in the car until I get home into my back cave? I mean, those are all kind of personal choices.
I was told that some people have my last name is recognized issues done to help them come.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so then I was just trying to include that, no, there are issues with the bathroom. Only 2 boys and 2 Is that something that's still happening?
Maria, are you still on, or Mackenzie?
Yes, but we can't, I'm sure this is a wonderful conversation. We can't understand a thing that you're saying.
Oh, listen, I heard today that there might still be an issue with some of the plumbing concerns for the bathrooms at Bethel Road. Is that still a problem that some bathrooms are closed almost all of the time because of backing up after too much use?
Mark, can you clarify that for me? You're just coming through really.
Do you have any issues with the public restrooms at Bechtel not being usable?
Not being usable? You
Right.
mean so that there wouldn't be so many students in one bathroom?
No, no. Is the plumbing working? Are they backed up or you can't use them? I'm unaware of any plumbing issues at Bechtel and Bath.
No, all of our student bathroom, well, okay. There was a problem with one of the toilets in the gym bathroom. Is that what you're hearing? Because the other two student bathrooms are fine. And I believe that was resolved.
To my knowledge, and I talked with Terry about this, there's nothing that we're aware of at Bechtel with restrooms. They're all functioning fine.
Do we all have hot and cold water?
There was a problem with one of the toilets in the gym when we went out, and but then that was resolved. So
Yeah, we did some work while we've been out with Bechtel. Yeah, but the plumbing you're talking about, the trenching in between the rooms, was to make the sinks work in the classroom. Had nothing to do with that.
Okay, well,
None of the sinks in the science room work.
yes, not all the sinks in the classrooms work.
Right,
no, they don't.
right. Because we only did the one wing. We have to do all of it.
So for people to be concerned that their students can't come in and wash their hands and go down, there's probably something that will be fixed by the types.
No.
They can-
Every room will have a
They'll have
hand,
to-
every room will have has a hand sanitizer. Every one of them has that. Yeah, because we would literally have to go re-plumb Bechtel's, every room at Bechtel's school. All the bathrooms work, but the sink, remember the sinks in the rooms are a sink usually.
Yeah.
And a little tough to have 30 kids in a sink. And so every room in the district has hand sanitizer when you walk in, and that's part of the process. If you leave the classroom and go to the bathroom, when you come in, you need to wash your hands. Even though you say, I did it at the bathroom, it doesn't matter. That's the process. Everybody comes in regardless. And does it.
And then there was a concern by some that with kindergarten classes, that I wrote with, since I could remember that a class of kindergartners would be 16 students. Now, that would mean twice 16 students.
Depends on our numbers.
Okay, so none of that is necessarily set in stone.
We're going to take our numbers, and we believe based on our enrollment in kindergarten, we'll be able to have an AM and a PM section. We definitely don't want to go over 16 in either of the. The more problematic issue we're going to have is a group of parents might all want AM instead of PM.
Yeah, you always consider that.
But we're going to have no classroom should be over 16, and they should be split AM and PM.
The concern that came up, I think, is that the max for a kindergarten teacher to teach is around 24.
Right.
And if they end up with 32, they just think that that's really good. And that's,
Agreed.
oh, okay, as long as you know that's a breach of contract, and no one, of everyone I've spoken with in the kindergarten,
We're going to 16, not 13.
right, but one teacher will have a group of 16 in the morning, and that same teacher has another group of 16 in the afternoon.
The
I
high school
understand that
teachers
correctly.
have 45 kids.
Right, but high school and kinder are a little different. And that's another thing, it's just.
But
Okay.
it doesn't,
No, well, that's the other thing that people are dealing with, is their understanding that years ago it was passed. That kindergarten teacher does not do two different groups of kids, it's like teaching.
I don't know. I think we'll have to look into and see what the number of contacts, not necessarily how many you have in touch with contacts per day. Is what you're talking about.
That's exactly. And I know a long while back, they had said a lot to say that they 15 minutes at a time or something. But people
you're
that are-
assuming that's one class. the kindergarten.
Excuse me, you guys.
Yeah,
This is Barbary Gonzalez. I know I can hear the word kindergarten, but I can't hear anything you guys are saying about kindergarten.
Well, we're talking about the AM and PM thing in kindergarten and class size and what we're going to be able to do with that. And what the goal is to try and split it into two equal groups. I mean, obviously, I'd like to not do half-day kindergarten, but I also can't hire 4 additional staff at Brookside to get our ratio down. I mean, there's only so many things we can do financially.
and see, this is, the reason I'm bringing them up, Barbary, is because I've heard from some people at your site. Part of what is very important to me that we avoid an issue before it blows up in my face. The other part of the issue is there was some talk about it, and this came more from the community than teachers, but why would we do a TK when we already have an issue with not enough space for kinders? TK is not as reimbursed, or at all, from the state as is kinder. And my big thing was, so what's your plan? If you don't like this, what's your plan? Well, that came up, because kind of getting into it, as a part of the plan that maybe TKs shouldn't happen when we're having such crunch issues. My other big thing that ties in with all of this is if the board is to make decisions on June 17th, some people, the way I'm feeling, the way they're speaking to me, is that they don't feel that all of their input is being discussed during the meetings. Okay, now that always happens. People always like that their representation is really in there. So they want an opportunity, or sounded interested in an opportunity of submitting their concerns and questions to the board, which at that point was when I was saying, well, you're calling and you call some others, they'll talk to you, But I'm bringing them up so you're not side basket.
Well, the biggest issue for those people is to do the survey.
Yeah.
Because the survey has multiple places where they can type paragraphs if they want.
Yeah.
I want their input, but giving it to the board doesn't help. You got to give it to the committee who's planning what they're going to present to you. So that's the group who's going to see the parent survey. But you need to encourage them to write into the survey. And if they write into the survey and they want to write in there, I'd like Mark to call me, I'll call them. But we have to get their input to the planning. And Barbara, can you answer the question about, do you do TK or not do TK to reduce class size?
So unfortunately, that would have to be a waiver of some sort from the state because it's a requirement that we have to offer it.
That we have to offer TK?
We have to offer TK, yes. So that would have to be some sort of a waiver from the state. We were thinking the same thing because that would at least free up one other position, another half a day of a teacher. But the state requires us to have TK as an option for parents.
How many years have we been offering TK?
Ooh, I was the first one to teach TK 7 years, maybe. I'm just guessing on the numbers or how many years it's been.
Yeah, I was unaware that we had to offer TK. I just know that we have one.
It came on board early on, right?
But again, Paul, I can find out because they're giving all kinds of waivers on everything. Barbara, if we could get it waivered, would that be a good idea for you?
Well, I mean, it would free up at least another kindergarten teacher to teach a half day. I don't know if it would, allow too much as far as going to a full day program. But that would allow some spots open. Right now, I believe they're looking at, there's only one spot left, even looking at half day classes with 16 as a maximum. There's only one spot left for one more child, and we'll have to think of how we're going to have another section of it.
Right. Yeah, I will look into it. I didn't realize it was a requirement, but the issue for me is that, we have to divide the students into two equal groups as best we can. And, we're working through hopefully a one-time, one-year issue. But in regards to class size and groups, we try to keep class sizes to 22 or less in K2. But the class size is that you just have two classes, just like they do in middle school, high school, everywhere else.
Right, yeah. That kind of looks at the physical needs of the room. And the other one looks at the responsibility. And so that's something that I just think it's handy to come and have an idea in your head of what you want to say to someone, putting it under something.
If they believe that we need to be at 11 in each room to stay at 22, that's not going to happen. That's going to be about 4 more teachers. Financially, there's no possibility of that. And so, if kindergarten goes full day, then every classroom is going to go. Those are our only options. It started out pretty good. I haven't really looked at it much. I'm kind of going to wait for a few days, and then if we don't have it, I want to send out a second text message. One more, hey, if you haven't filled it out, fill it out.
And then lastly, there's last time I think we touched upon it because I was but is there a committee or anything that to set up people who are going to decide which are the two things to do as soon as you realize there's an ability to do it and you can't get away to not do something in our district? I'm thinking in particular that you have our program. I know that those teachers are placed to ensure that things that would be less than the effects. But for that, for the EL or the additional have their program back, which used to be a very big part of the necessity of that. And big times, which neither of them thought that they had to do. When you feel really good, you should be able to do it. That doesn't do that. So it's all being, even the learning methods, what does matter is how to put that picture where people is the kind of whatever it is. I could not say today, oh yeah, we're going to make a community. Only because a lot of people knew what was in the past, and there were all these ones, stakeholder committees, or whatever. People would come together and say, well, here's my list, here's this, and here's my list. Things like that. None of that is in the list.
No. My goal is to give the board a list of here are the things we're not able to do this year. Here is the priority, I think, for putting them back into place. But also, here's how much it costs to do that. Because that's a factor as well. And so you guys will set the pace of, if magic money comes from the federal government and we do that, you'll say, well, we have $300,000 from the federal government. Let's look at our priorities. What can we put that in place? And that's what I'm going to get from Nikki now that we got through our budget, is to reinstate those. What does it cost?
Part of the question is,
Right. Exactly. And not only just reinstating that program, but my advice will be is that we can reinstate things when we have a capital candidate to take the other thing. Because I don't want to hire people we normally wouldn't hire just to reinstate a program. So how many of those could we do on the fly next year? I'm going to guess it's not many. Because that means I have to have a suitable replacement. If we're able to put an EL teacher back in EL, somebody's got to go into that class. So
I think Paul's got a great point that we should have that list at some point. We need to put that together. But we need to, I don't think we're going to need it anytime soon. But at some point, we really need to consider that. When the budget picture improves. And obviously, I like the idea of prioritizing and then the pros and cons to how we can make this thing happen. I'm sorry to say, I don't believe that that's something that we can do.
I'm all caught up in getting prepared. I think our best plan is to go into a COVID-friendly schedule. That's going to take the most work, the most staff movement to get into. Get into the best COVID-friendly schedule we can afford to do that's going to do some decent academics, not the best, but decent. And then prepare to start the fall. And start the fall that way, even if things are getting more wonderful as we go. Still start the fall that way. And let's let it hit the fan for a while. We can always go back to what we were doing. But we can't jump into this schedule without a lot of preparation. And I'd rather spend our time now going into a much more conducive COVID schedule. Because I think we're either going to be in a COVID schedule or we're going to be home. I don't think there's really no middle ground. I don't think there's any way we're going to be in a situation where we just return as normal with washing your hands and stay away from each other. I just don't think that's going to happen. So I think we prepare for a COVID schedule and hopefully it doesn't hit the fan and we can do that at least long enough to establish. I mean, imagine trying, as Barbary in kindergarten tries to establish an educational atmosphere with 5-year-olds. How do you do that over a computer? I mean, it's really impossible. So hopefully we'll get some time to do that before it hits the fan, so at least she has a little bit of that.
Do they have a, I mean, I know in the past there was teacher, not being teacher, principal would be like the teacher, but then they had aides there in the class, with things like that for you still do that?
I would assume districts could do that. What I found out when I asked questions about ELL, there's really no model they say you ought to do. They tell every district to do what works best for your district. And so most models that are really productive are not full of. They're push-in, and that push-in is either a teacher, a para, something like that.
Yeah, the US class is the truly best is if you have any of that. So, okay, now those are the biggest things.
I think that when we go to look at EL, I think we need to look and say, this is our window of opportunity. What do we want to do? How can we make this better when we do it? So in short, everything may not return the way exactly what.
I mean, you know, some of them, some changes.
Yeah.
So, sounds like we are at adjournment, but I wanted to remind everybody we do have a meeting on the 22nd, 5 p.m. It will be a Zoom meeting. So next, I just real quickly, whether it's a Zoom meeting or it's going to be a Boots meeting. So the Zoom meeting is the next meeting.
I have a question. Can I ask something? Did we already do public comments for items not on the agenda?
I'm sorry, we can certainly do that. We gave it all to Paula.
Yeah, I took all your time.
We just call that Paula's line.
Yeah, no. Sorry.
Go ahead, Maria.
Okay, so I want to speak for all of us who are here remotely that we can't, ever since you passed the last resolution, we can't understand a thing you're saying. It's not really a public meeting because the public, those of us who are remote, can't understand what you're saying. Something has to, and we did this the last meeting, the same thing. We need to find some other way to have you all have mics or something because it's not coming through. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, we have to amp up our technology game here. Our next meeting is going to be on the 22nd. It's going to be a Zoom meeting only. It's going to be just one or two items that just need to be passed timely. It's not really a normal board meeting.
Maria?
Yes?
When Nikki was talking, for example, do you have any problem hearing her?
Yeah, no, Nikki was fine, but she was with us through Zoom.
Right, okay, I'm
And-
just trying to make sure that that's where the problem was.
Pardon?
I was just trying to make sure that that's where our problem lies.
No.
If we were all Zoom, maybe it would be better answered.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Maria.
Yes, I think that if you were all Zoom, we would hear you all. And but I don't know if you can all be in the same room through a Zoom
Right.
meeting, but
we
it would be
we would have a
something to
front microphone. We
If
need
you're all,
a camera and a microphone that has a projective microphone.
If you guys are all Zooming in the same room, then everybody gets the feedback, so it doesn't work.
Now, I need to get tech to bring in the equipment from the cable TV station.
We'll have to
Yes.
discuss a little bit and see if we can improve this. I appreciate the feedback.
We didn't get to hear anything that Paula was asking or attending to, and anything that Alex, what you were saying, we missed as well.
Yeah.
Apologize, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
It's okay, it's just,
We
You
need to
probably
fix
can
it.
do better than them
Hear it.
because I'm
Let's just
talking
fix it,
loud
please.
and I'm not that far from the mic.
Well, Mark, we're having trouble understanding you because of the feedback, whatever feedback there is there that's happening.
Okay.
We'll take steps to try and fix that, Maria. Appreciate your feedback.
Okay, thank you.
So, meeting schedules are the 22nd at 5 o'clock will be a Zoom only meeting. June 22nd. The next meeting scheduled, the only other meeting that is currently scheduled is July 17th. Okay, what time is that?
That will have to be an on-site meeting.
Will we have closed session? Probably.
Probably. The 17th meeting is where we're going to talk about our COVID-friendly schedule.
17th of July.
July.
I thought it was, I thought it was the 13th of July.
And we talked about the 3rd, the 13th, and we settled on the 17th.
Bob can't come the 13th.
Oh, that's right, it is the 17th, that's right, you're correct. I apologize.
Okay.
Okay, good. So Zoom meeting, 5 o'clock, June 22nd, and then the closed session and regular meeting, July 17th.
Correct.
4 o'clock closed session.
Yep.
Okay, good.
And that one issue that we talked about in closed session last meeting. public comments together.
I've already,
I'm sorry, what was the date of the July meeting? I need a 15th,
17.
17th, thank you.
I don't believe that.
I know,
I'm going to turn you over to my.
No, he dealt with my questions. He couldn't answer this one. No.
And maybe I don't know what you and I together, maybe this is the same thing. but-
If you need to follow this up, about the.
Are we adjourning?
I will have another question.
Did you have another question? You said when we're all done.
After.
Yeah, when we're all done, I'm sorry. Although I do really have other questions.
Yeah,
A motion to, entertain a motion to adjourn. Would anybody like to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Motion and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Bob.
We'll get better at this.
Bob, I'm gonna bring some documents out from Trina that she needs signatures on.
Did you catch that, Bob?
Might have hit it from the bathroom already.
Hey, Bob.
Yes.
Alex
Yes.
is going to bring some documents he needs you to sign out to your place.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
We should just say-